Shit. I was not expecting that. I was not expecting that.
Hi.
Hello.
Hey, man.
Hi, I'm good.
Chris.
Yeah.
It's been way too long since I've last seen you.
Yeah, what have you been up to, man?
Honestly, not a lot. I wish I could say I've been up to a lot more, but I got a new job. I got 2 new jobs, actually.
Wait, somebody actually pays you?
Yeah, unfortunately for them, I get paid for jobs.
I've known this guy a long time. Very hard worker, not very productive overall somehow, and not very often paid, unfortunately. So
Actually, this is quite interesting, Chris, because like you used to be one of my ex-professors. Like you used to teach me. How was I as a student? Like in your eyes?
Wow, that's a really difficult question to ask me on tape for a job I no longer do. Right. No, I found you always very eager, and I always found you dedicated. I have to now picture the group that you were in again.
Was it the one with the beeswax?
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. So you had some really good team members. And what I found really weird, the idea was good, team was decent, but no follow through.
Mm-hmm.
So you could have easily made that work, I think, in my opinion. But somehow the team demotivated itself.
Yeah.
I don't know what your part in that was. I think you should be more in the foreground.
I think that's really interesting because I've worked on a lot of stuff with Niloy, and a lot of times it is very good setup, very eager. He's very capable, but the follow through just seems to lag a bit behind. So,
Guys, this is not about me.
It's all about Chris.
but I will take any chance I can to always try to get him on the right.
Yeah, I always get bullied a lot in all these podcasts.
But yeah, maybe let's. Okay, so Chris, give us a little introduction about yourself. What's the main things that you do? Your biggest accomplishments? How would you
are you,
introduce-
Chris?
Yeah, exactly.
Wow. That's a big question. I like to excite people and bring out the best in them. Try to see, as I like to call it, their inner light. I do this, well, for students, but I nowadays do it just for projects and people trying to combine new ideas. I do this as, the co-founder of Autonomy and a board member there. But I also still do it as a researcher and teacher for Hogeschool Windesheim. Yeah, I'm called Chris. Yeah,
Nice.
my biggest accomplishment.
Then that's
I would
completely
say-
self-defined. By the way.
Yeah. That is, I guess, self-defined. So, I've seen many places and I've done many projects in my life. I've also been a teacher for a long time, and I guess I'm the kind of teacher that would like to be defined by the successes that he perpetuates. So, AKA, well, what can you say about your classes or your lessons or your teaching or your projects if they all don't make it or don't do anything with it? And with that, I can say I'm very proud of the projects that I've started with many of my students and people that believe in me. Say, for example, the person that's sitting across from me, right?
Yes.
Samin and his magic frames.
Yeah.
Also, Fearless Farming in Slovakia. I'm very proud of that one. But even the fact that, you're ex-students and you're still talking to me, that's a great honor. And for example, the fact that one of my youngest students now works with me and kind of teaches me. So the student had become the teacher and the teacher had become the student. I think that's one of the most humbling and also greatest achievements that I can put my name to. Out of all the things that I've done in my life.
That sounds really nice. I think that's a very nice or interesting personality you have there, and ways of describing achievements. I didn't realize that you were also one of the key guys of Magic Frames. So yeah. Yeah, nice.
One of the co-owner, one of the key guys.
Key guys, co-founders.
He kind of was in the group that founded it.
Right, founder.
If you guys need some photos.
Magic frames is where you have to go. Nice.
For sure.
And Chris, like, he gave us some money in the beginning and also some advice, still is advising us. And so he kind of gave us this initial boost to like, hey, you guys are cool, keep it up, keep going. And that was quite empowering.
Nice, yeah. So Simon was the one who actually set this up. So I just want to say thank you for that.
Thank you to Simon as well, yeah. By the way.
Thank you guys.
Yeah. So I don't know, do you have the structure of what we're going to talk about?
Well, yeah, first of all, we're going to talk about Chris. So more on Chris is like, what kind of got you into like the stuff that you are into? Like,
Sorry, no, again?
what kind of makes you kick? What makes you tick?
Oh yeah, it kind of defines somehow what I'm doing as well. I'm very triggered by passion. So it doesn't necessarily really mean what it is. Of course, I have moral boundaries somewhere. But if you really believe in it and you really want to make that happen, that really attracts me. It's kind of, it's not confidence. It is a drive to do something new, something truly. I see it like a form of art, but it can be coding, but it can also not be coding. That's what specifically drives me towards doing any project. And the projects that I'm very much involved with now all have to do with power and how that is acquired, how that is distributed, how you agree with it, or how do you give your consent to it in such a way that people actually agree with the rules that are going on.
Mm-hmm.
And in a digital age, that is becoming more and more apparent, to me at least, that it's very absent. Our consent is kind of,
manufactured, some would say.
Not just assumed.
Assumed.
You assume that everything is okay.
Yeah. And is that, you said that that's something that happened more around the digital age? So, or is this also a wider, maybe not criticism, but just in general view on society?
Well, I think that we've gone through an entire development stage there. And I didn't even know how big the extent of this was until I started talking to the older generations. For something that really struck me as odd and bizarre. So nowadays we see some protesting again.
Yeah.
Right. So people march on the farmer protest, or in France, or all kinds of places they're protesting, and it strikes to me that that's very new. That's very unique event and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But when you speak a little bit to the older generation, they speak of unions and they speak about protesting every few days.
Right.
Where if you change the alcohol law to be even 1% more, they'll wreck the city.
Yeah.
That's what they'll do. And you can't mess with them. And nowadays, what I think is that on the average, people are very docile. They kind of just go along with it. Everybody disagrees about politics. Everybody's saying, they're all doing it bad. But there's no action from it. No demand no hard demand. Well, I'm starting to see that now again, right? Because things are just getting out of hand so much.
We're finally being activated again, yeah?
But now it's not the process or the system that is activating us or incentivizing us. It is just, okay, the car is about to hit the wall. We have to really start steering. And I don't care which direction you go, but please don't go forward, right? And that's the kind of attitude that brings people out to the street right now. It's just, it's just so bad we can't ignore it anymore.
But a question that I had is like, what do you think made us this docile? Like prior to this, you said that like people, even if they changed 1% of alcohol, they would go out and protest and riot and whatnot. But what's the difference? What's the biggest difference now? Why is it that we're
How
this
did we
docile?
get here? That the youth disagrees.
That's a whole research angle that you're. Nice thesis opportunity right there. But I would say people have become very content with the way life is. And for a long time, outside threats kind of dissipated, right? So we had, think about history and think about the history in the last 100 years. Don't think further than back to that because it doesn't make sense anymore then. But within the last 100 years, we had wars, world wars, we had then a Cold War, and then we had a whole period of nothing,
Right.
especially around Europe, right? And it kind of went in the direction of, right, please don't touch the wheel, don't do anything, let's just sail along. It's working, okay? Finally, it's working. People are no longer hungry. We have power. We have washing machines. Everybody has an okay and decent standard of living. People have jobs, right? And as a result, people are kind of going against protesters with the idea of you're hurting your fellow man by trying to protest, by trying to wreck a system that is actually working very well for us. And in my opinion, it's now come to a stage that we have realized, no, it was actually borrowed time. We have borrowed our that kind of wealth in existence, but it wasn't really real, and you
It
can
was
really
not sustainable.
yeah, you can really there was you can even see it in graphs, and there was this very unique study that was done. First, the wage and the power that you could do, the koopkracht as we say in Dutch, and the amount of productivity per worker, and you suddenly see a very steep deviation around the 70s, where the productivity of the worker
Absolutely.
keeps increasing, but the wage compensation that goes with that stagnates in a straight line.
I love the things that you were saying right now, Chris, and these are things that I really try to talk a lot about with my youth. And actually, Nila will know this, but since the age of 8 or 9, I was talking about these things on the football pitch.
Wow.
Trying to explain to people that the system is going well, but it's on borrowed time, and that a lot of the inequalities and sort of, for me also, just because of my background a bit, neo-colonialist attitudes that we have will eventually lead to a backlash that where the system can no longer be sustained. So yeah,
Borrowed money,
yeah,
Like,
exactly,
the amount
with the
of
deficit and
wealth
everything.
created in the last 50 years is insane.
Yeah.
And on top of that, 10 years ago, we saw a really big revival of protesting, Occupy Wall Street, Autonomous, stuff like that. Social warriors coming into the frame, and especially on the digital area. And that kind of dissipated again within the next 10 years. And now we're only talking about what differentiates you from me, right? What's the color of your skin, and how your skin color determines everything, and your background and stuff like that. And we make all kinds of assumptions. I think that's very dangerous. I mean, I'm very happy that people are finding themselves in their own way. I think that's amazing. But I think we're very careful with labeling things and dividing each other, because we have so much going for each other.
I do think that a big part of what has allowed the people steering the wheel to just keep steering it without our consent or with our assumed consent, I think is it's been a lot harder for us to gather in unions, because we keep focusing on these differences that, you come from that background or I come from this background. And I think that there's a lot of people who benefit from us arguing over things that don't really affect us, and the amount of hours that we spend dividing ourselves between genders or ways that we see sexuality or these sort of things, when in reality we have a lot more in common to fight for, I think.
Yes, I think those topics are relevant, but they're for the family household, right? What you do in your backyard, that's totally up to you. That's the democracy ethos almost, right? Every man his own castle. Great, do whatever you want in your own castle. But then it's about the kingdom as a whole, and how do we govern the kingdom? And well, I don't know if for sure if it's it's controlled, but they effects of these, and right. You say people benefit from us not standing together. Yeah, I don't know in what extent this is by design, but it strikes me as big coincidence, as it were. Especially if we look back at how financial markets and people were 10 years ago, and how we are now. It's almost like crises are the new normal. Yeah, and this is very strange.
Yeah.
Do you almost think that we as a generation, because you're saying that we're kind of losing focus as to what we should be focusing on, and instead we're focusing on things that we shouldn't focus on? And do you think there's like some big outside force that's like trying to control us in a way, whether that be the government, whether that be something else?
I don't think there is a force in the world that is that competent to be able to do that on that scale. Are there people that are incentivizing certain directions? Of course, because, wherever there is a form of control, there's a person that benefits from that. But it can be very unintentional, or a side effect of that was never intended, right? So, for example, you could say, this is just an example, the social discussions around how you feel and what you should do with your body is a ploy by the health facilities in order to get more customers. That could be an incentive. I don't think that that's the case, but that could be incentive. And a side effect of that could be that this whole discussion is starting.
Right.
There's an unintentional side effect that could be starting. It's. I don't think that competent in that sense. But I do think, for example, especially if we're talking about financial controls or the way that we are governed, there are designs there. And I really believe that from our elected representatives, they do want our input and they do want our participation in these things. But it's very hard for people to get in. And actually following through with what you say you do, especially as, for example, a politician, can be very dangerous.
How so?
Because there are a lot of interests, especially business interests, that you're going against. Say, for example, just let's talk local Netherlands, right?
Yeah, for sure.
We had the Farmers Party has risen up. Congratulations. Hooray for you. Now actually starting to discuss again things for farmers, but actually implementing the changes that they would want to see would have a major impact on how businesses are run. And now you're suddenly fighting not against politics, but you're fighting against large parties again in this politics that have an interest against this.
Something that I have seen happening more and more is that the power of democracy and our voice being part of the government and following through with these plans becomes increasingly difficult, as you say, because we're now actually facing a huge undemocratic force that has a lot of power, which are these huge businesses. And the fact that they have been globalized means that actually a business concept or way of doing things in the US that might have started in the US actually controls not only a power in the US, but also holds power in Europe and in the rest of the world all of a sudden. Would you say that that's accurate, or?
Yeah, to an extent. Of course, these corporations and these interests, they are negotiating for better terms for themselves. And imagine for a moment, right? We are both two of these big conglomerates.
Right.
You want to play fair. You want to just you don't give. Samin is our elected representatives, right? Hello. We have to kind of convince him to vote for a issue. Right. Now you can do the right thing and not give him money, but if I do the wrong thing and give him money, he will suddenly start voting for me, even though you did nothing wrong.
Right.
And you start ending up into almost what they say, a Faustian bargain.
Yeah.
Where if you do not participate in those kinds of activities, you lose out in the end. And thus, bad behavior, as it were, is incentivized, while good behavior is punished.
Because then what will happen is that you will be seen as successful and I will be left behind reflecting on my actions, going, where did I go wrong in my business, right? And when I decided to pay my workers more, when I decided to be less aggressive with my marketing and data control, when I decided to be less corrupt with the politicians, I will feel like, oh, well, I made a mistake there that put me...
Not just from an ethical standpoint.
Right.
Talk business. Right? You lose market share.
Exactly.
You lose money. And therefore you lose resources. You fall behind. I started to creep into your market share. And I make a new innovation. I get a new law passed. And you're gone.
And I've lost, and I feel like I've lost at the game that was my life goal to play, right?
Yes.
And that I defined my success around and my social status and everything else. So obviously that's going to have a hard impact.
On a corporation, you're not on the corporation level. I'm sure that the CEO thinks about his personal image.
Right.
But on a corporate level, you're thinking also about all of the employees that you have to
absolutely
that you have to finance. The stakes, it's a good quote. The throne looks omnipotent from afar, but not so much as if you sit on it. Right.
Right.
once you are in power or have a position of power, your stakes and your odds change, and you start to make decisions that might be against your code of ethics, but are for, in your opinion, at that stage, for the greater good. And it's those small increments that slowly switch you to.
And when you multiply that against a global economic system that keeps growing exponentially, all of a sudden you have entire societies that are being influenced by these sort of incremental changes, right?
Yes.
Crazy.
I'm curious because, Chris, you obviously know a lot about these dynamics. And
I try.
What brought you in the more tech area? Why did you think this is a space where you could like incorporate changes in the world?
That's a good question. That's a good question. Specifically because I am not very tech savvy, actually.
Business background, actually, right?
Yes, and I'm a social person. So I would say when I actually taught programming, for example, I would say I'm one of the worst programmers in the world, and I'm not very talented, as I would say, with technology. I can use it, and I'm actually pretty good with it, but that's because I forced myself to do it. But I discovered from a very young age the difference it makes to have a digital implementation of something, and how much that can change how people work together and the goods that they can produce. So I see it like I'm giving you a new version of the hammer, a new version of a production machine that you can then use to make even greater good in the world. And that change, in the last few years, has become ever more prevalent. If you cannot use digital, 20 years ago, if you didn't know how to use digital tools, you were okay. Nowadays, if you do not know how a computer works, at least on a fundamental level where you can navigate through it and your phone and stuff like that, you're just out. You can't have a job anymore if you don't know how to open your email.
Yeah.
It sounds strange, but 20 years ago, people didn't know. There was a large percentage of the population that just didn't know how that worked.
Yeah.
So in a digital age, it's just using the tools that are available. And I also say that at the moment, specifically in corporation and how we talk about power and agreement, and specifically also consent, right? What happens to what I do? That's not part of the discussion in digital formats. It is here in social formats, right? You agree to come here. You agree to sit down. You agree to have this talk. And you can walk away at any moment.
Yeah.
And that's not so true in digital worlds.
Right.
Could you maybe elaborate on that? What do you mean by that is not so online? How is it that we're, let's say, I'm consenting to something or I'm not consenting to something online?
Do you use Facebook?
No. Instagram, yeah.
Okay, same, by the way, same company.
Yeah.
When you create an account, there's this moment where you say, do you accept the agreement? What happens if you do not check that box?
I would be led to think that they do what I tell them that I do not consent to, so they take that into consideration and they don't actually.
Okay, so you create an account, you enter your username. It says by clicking create, you accept the terms and agreement, or you have like a box that says a think. Do you accept the terms and agreements? What happens if you do not click that box?
I think it doesn't let you create the account, right?
Exactly. So it's not a consensual agreement. It's you do what I say or you're not getting in. Right? It's not a negotiation at any stage. And if you actually look into what is written, and nobody ever does, but if you actually look in what is written, I doubt you agree to all of it. Very, very doubt. Even the most persons that say, well, I have nothing to hide, go ahead, take everything, right? They would not be okay with everything, especially if they would be able to translate it in a language they could actually understand, because it's legalese.
Are you able to do that for us right now, just with a few examples?
What? To give consent?
Yeah, what are some examples, for example, with Instagram, where we've given consent that if you told the average person like me and Neela right now, we would...
If you have installed Facebook Messenger, for example.
Yeah, I have that.
Facebook now has access to all of the files on the device, even those that you have nothing to do with Facebook.
Every single file that passes through my device.
Everything.
And they have access to what? To view it, to share it, to sell it? Okay.
They own it.
Yeah, fair.
Damn.
Everything that you upload to Google, it's not just in their cloud service. They own it.
So if I post a podcast on Google to transfer it so he can post it on TikTok or something,
They won't stop you.
right?
But if there would ever be a discussion about who owns it, it's theirs now.
Simply because I use their service to pass
Because
it on.
you upload it there.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Damn, okay.
Yes.
That's a serious issue with copyrights, I guess.
It gets scarier. Cambridge Analytica.
Yeah, I heard a little bit about it.
How did they get so much data?
I'm not quite sure, actually.
What they would do is they would have this test on Facebook that you could fill in. I feel a little bit more introverted, extroverted. There's this whole test thingy that you had. Okay, they built a profile about you. But as soon as you installed that thing, it would not only get that from you, it would go to your contact friends list of all of your friends. Go to their profile. Take all of that information. All of your friends' friends. Take all of that information. There was not just did you agree to give away your own information, you gave away everybody that was connected to you.
Via social media.
Via that platform, via Facebook.
Mm.
Or via, watch the whole, they did a beautiful, The Great Hack.
Mm.
Beautiful documentary, go see it.
Yeah.
And the Social Dilemma, I'm hearing as well behind me.
Yeah.
Yes, go watch that. It's
I think
really
that
good.
the Social Dilemma is a new one on Netflix, right? Or is it? Yeah.
Yes.
Perfect.
What I'm very interested, because I feel like a lot of people are aware of these problems, maybe not to this extent, but we all know that it's really bad how much our data is used, our whole privacy is misused in the digital world.
Mhm.
But to shift this whole conversation a bit more from the problem to perhaps ideas, solutions and innovations, what do you think, Chris, are some ways to improve this situation?
Well, that's why I'm doing what I'm doing. But we need, like human beings, we need to design digital systems, especially when we're talking about dealing with people in systems, to be a little bit more human. So to build autonomy within those systems, that I can say no, I can go away, and there's no consequences of that. Especially now that with all the new digital things that are coming into place, right? So we started with the internet, and it was a great invention. It gave us access to everything. Amazing.
Mm.
But we didn't see the second part of that agreement, and that was that everything got access to us. And now that we're dealing with people within this in these systems that are giving in so much information in these systems about how they function and how they work, that these machines are starting to learn and have more control over us than we have over it. So it is prudent to now think about how can we build barriers in between that, so that we can, well, keep control over the machines instead of the machines controlling us. And you think that's a really weird statement, maybe, but think about how much you use your phone and how much you're dependent on that phone to do your everyday thing. I don't know how much this has already progressed, but soon you might get, you need to do tasks every day in order to just keep the phone functional and stuff like that. And soon you're into a system that, oh, wow, you can't enter this building because you didn't like this post on Facebook yet. Whoa. Right? And this is where the systems really fast go towards, and not because they're evil. Forget this. It's not because they're evil. It's because the incentives drive them in that direction. If I am a company and I want to do the right thing, remember Google started with "Don't be evil."
Yeah, and then they changed that.
They changed it. But why?
Yeah, because I think at a certain point they realized this is a very conflicting message, because if I want to do good for my people, as you're saying, for my people, the people who work for my company,
yes,
then I have to do certain things that in the world might be seen as evil by other people, right?
I would say maybe that's part of the agreement, yes, or the changes that they made. No, but I think mostly it's because they have stakeholders. Those stakeholders want profits above anything else. They're only judged on that part. So their company is steered towards make more money.
And that's
now
a fundamental incentive that we have seen is the one of the major flaws of the capitalist system is that when you have a company where you say that the moral responsibility of the shareholders is to create a moral responsibility of the company to create the most amount of money profitable possible for the shareholders, right? Then you disregard.
I disagree that this is a problem of the capitalistic system. I think the capitalistic system is one of the best inventions humankind has ever had. There's a difference there within stock and how money is used. So as a financial, if you are a CEO of Google tomorrow, you're hired, right? What happens is that you get a stock percentage and you are judged for the next 5 years on your performance within that company. So what do? You maximize massively for profits for the next 5 years. What happens after that? Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Somebody else's problem, right? The next CEO comes into a burning house. And you can point as the other CEO to the old CEO and say, oh, well, but the other guy did it really badly and stuff like that. Your stakeholders won't. They don't care. They only care about now.
So, and you don't think that this short-term profit like focus and also this incentive system around liquidity and shares is a fundamental part of the capitalist system?
Oh, it is a fundamental part of the capitalist system. It's the way, but it's the way that's employed that's the difference. If you think about capitalism, just as I am pulling money forward from the future, right? One day I'm going to make 100 euros. But now I need that 100 euros to make the machine that will give me that 100 euros. That's a great thing to have. Imagine if that was not the case. Then we're back to feudal systems. Now I have to ask Lord Samin, please give me some money. And Lord Samin will say, no, go work in the field. Right? There's no way to innovate. There's no way to move forward as a society. With capitalism, and I was able to drag that productivity into the now in order to have it in the future. This kind of even has sustainable and long-term thinking as its core ingrained within it. Right. But what happens with financial incentives, especially, for example, with compound interest and loaning at an interest, is that I am pushing the machine to move ever faster than it should go in order to pay off the debt that I have right now. And that's when the choices start happening that you don't want to make as a company, but you will make. Because if it's, fire these 100 workers, scale down your entire production factory, don't do any business anymore with this country, or just take the money, but deal with regimes that you shouldn't be dealing with, sign in laws that you shouldn't sign in. And the proposition changes, especially if it's if you can make it so that it's never revealed. You're not held accountable for those actions. Right. And we see scandals day after day of the big corporations. What happens?
No accountability.
They get a fine. Oh wow! I made 100 million euro extra by scamming the hell out of people, and I get a 1 million euro fine. You know what happens? That's the cost of business.
It's factored into the cost. You're absolutely right. It's the production cost.
So would you say that accountability would improve this entire system, and is that also something you want to achieve with Tonomy and with your company?
Yes. So first off, I didn't start a company. I started a foundation. It's a little bit different because if I started a company, I get the same formula back. Right, that's the whole point of doing this, right? There's a loop, right? I start out doing the great thing. I get some investors. The investors force me to make money. I have to compromise on my ethics in order to make money. And then it starts to not work anymore. So I created indeed a foundation in order to create software to create these barriers in between us and create more participation between us and systems, stuff like that. But yes, it's about was one of my whole thesis is it's not, a lot of people say we need more transparency, but that really quickly leads to authoritarian dictatorships. If I have a camera everywhere, not really free to make my own choices, am I? Right? So it's not total transparency, but it's accountability that we need. If I need to record what happened, and if it turns out things went really bad, I have to be held responsible for my actions, good or bad. And you can see this on all levels. I love this, for example, on a government level, right? A politician A says, "I'm going to do this." Do you have any idea if he actually did it?
No.
Do you? It's come out, for example, in Dutch politicians. If you actually go into their voting record, you'll see that they vote against issues that are some of their main standpoints. And you're like, okay, but why is this not revealed in the record anywhere, or why is this not blatantly? You only hear it through outrage.
Yeah.
Right, like the VVD and this referendum, for example,
and certain like outlets that are by general,
just a referendum, sorry.
Which and then like and these outlets that do report on this, and the people who are outraged when saying it are then labeled as kind of like fringe or outcasts by the mainstream.
Yes, this is another thing: the normalization of the making people that cry out be idiots.
Yeah,
and I especially love this from the flat Earth community.
Yeah.
Why is that so hyped?
Because you want to, first of all, associate very negative and ridiculous things with conspiracy theories to then be able to call everything a conspiracy theory, right?
Well, conspiracy is only that people that have power come together to make a plan, to conspire. Right. That's a really weird notion. People that are in power come up with a plan to keep power. Oh, that's...
Don't be ridiculous, and actually gonna tell me that the moon is made of cheese.
Yeah. That would be
it isn't? What?
No. What was that movie again? The Nazis on the other side of the moon. That was beautiful.
There's a movie like that?
Yeah.
With the Kotadamaron. What's it?
I've heard people talk about it, but I've never seen it.
Oh Lord!
It's like
sounds like an interesting movie.
Oh Lord!
but yeah.
Did I answer your question? Sorry.
Yeah.
I deviate a lot.
But I think
that's alright.
For them, it's maybe interesting.
Yeah, I wanna.
I like. Chris has his foundation, Tonomy, with other people here in the space, and I recently just joined them. Yes, exactly. So I just joined them. And as a partner and an intern, so I know quite a lot. But I think for you guys, it is really interesting. And
yeah, I mean, with this setup that we've talked about and your mentality, it's definitely intriguing to my worldview. So tell me, like, I'm really fascinated. What have you founded? What are you working on?
So we have founded the Autonomy Foundation. That's autonomy without the pain. In Dutch, we say "ow." Right, so autonomy without the ow is autonomy. And we make tools to make autonomy very easy. We create open source, not just open source, because open source is not on its own is not enough. Open source non-profit tools to create and white label tools that create these barriers in between them that people and companies and individuals can freely take. And make their own version of and host themselves. In this way, they become independent even from us.
Right.
And by doing that, we hope to kind of build this up from the ground level, that companies can be first individual on their own and then create accountability internally. And then, because other people also use the same tools and the tools kind of recognize and understand each other, then suddenly you can hold other people accountable in the same way. And thus you build up like almost a web of trust, right? Almost similarly to how we deal as human beings, right? Because why would I trust you? On the get-go, I trust you a little bit, right? I give everybody the doubt of the being, the intention that you're probably a good person, but only through your record and your actions do I know if you can actually be trusted.
Right.
And that record does not only come from me, but it comes from people that are surrounded in my network. Right. If you do something really bad, it not just ruins your relationship with me, but also your relationship with everybody that I know, because I might say bad things about you.
Right. Please don't. But yeah, of course. Yeah.
Wow.
No.
Wow.
After this podcast, you never know.
Okay, I understand so much. Yes. Sure.
But yeah, really interesting. So, can you give us a bit of an example of one of these tools?
Yes.
Yeah.
So currently we have created Tonomy identification.
Yeah.
This is a simple logging app or a universal connector tool, another way of saying it, that allows you to log into different systems. So it kind of works similar to Google SSO or Facebook SSO, right? You've seen logging with Facebook. If you've seen that, works like this. With one major difference. You are the company. So you are Google, you are Facebook, you are your own entity first. And then you are part of an organization. And then that organization is part of a network. And that network is maybe part of something bigger. But it starts with you. And you are autonomous on an individual level first. And what we have accidentally done is we kind of, forgive, technical people will, but kind of reverse the logging procedure. Whereas normally I log in, say, Samin is like an organization of Google or something like that. I have to log in with his permission in order to join. And this changes the dynamic from turning it around. If I want to log into Samin's company, I give a part of me that shows that I am authorized to do so, but I don't give everything of me.
Right.
That shows me that I've got the approval in order to log into his system with his consent.
Right.
Course.
And so his company would be able to take your autonomous sort of login.
Yes.
Okay.
I still get the information.
The information that you need.
Own the information.
Okay.
You own it yourself.
It's okay. You love the nature example. I'll give the nature example.
Go on.
It changes the dynamic. I've not seen anybody do this yet. So not that I know. So maybe there's somebody out there that's already
Reach out.
Yes, reach out. But it changes the dynamic of how we work together from spider-like structures that we have created now. We even call it the web, right? Where there is a web and there's a spider in the center. The spider has total control over that web. And if a fly flies in, the spider is takes the full control over that fly. Now, if you become an employee, you are just another spider in the web. This is very good for control and what's going on, but you're not very individual. You can't make your own moves. The spider is in control. The fly is not.
Right.
And if you become a spider in the web, you're there by its grace, as it were, and you do not necessarily become more efficient. This changes the dynamic in how we work to ant-like structures. And in ant-like hive, it's sometimes a misconception that, for example, the queen is in control. Nobody is in control in an ant-like structure. It's all organized through hormones. And scent and position and hierarchy. It's not organized through direct control. There is no direct control in a hive. And every ant is its own individual, is very strong. But as a hive, they're insanely strong. But they can only do that with kind of consent control mechanisms. So what happens if you are an ant in a colony, you do not have access to the whole hive right away. No. You can only access certain parts of the hive with permission of certain ants and certain hormone tracks that you follow. If you enter the wrong part of the hive, you're seen as an intruder and you're murdered. Well, you're removed from the colony. There you go. So I have to find the correct word here. I don't want to use bad words because then your rating goes down. But you get my point. It's every individual is strong on its own.
Yeah.
And the collective organizes itself. There's advantages and disadvantages to the system. So it's control versus autonomy. If you create a lot of control systems, and we should definitely have some control systems in our lives, you create standardization and you create obedience, right? So I totally want the police to be in control. I don't want there to be discussion on everything, right? There should be one law, and if you break the law, there's fines for that and stuff like that. But to never have any say in how he is governed. That's different, right? So how he does his things.
So in a way, what you're outlining here is the difference between autonomous principles and anarchist principles.
No, not anarchists.
No?
No. Control is not an anarchist statement. Control is a very conservative kind of thinking.
But the difference between being pro-autonomy and pro-anarchism, because anarchist would be that there would be nobody with control, right?
Yes.
So, and you're saying that's not the system we're going for, but rather that there are some people in control, for example, the policeman, but when he approaches you, you still have some autonomy and some say in what happens in that situation.
For example. So just let's free will on this example, right?
Yeah.
So what would the difference be is that the policeman tries to give you a fine.
Yeah.
First off, he has to identify himself as being an actual police officer.
Yeah.
And he doesn't have to do this by just giving his badge, right? There's a whole cryptographic thing around it that can actually prove that he's that police officer. He doesn't even have to give you his name, but you can see where he is and where his responsibilities lies. You even may know his commanding officer, for example.
Right.
So in case there's something wrong, you now have somebody to identify within the system, and it's not nobody knows who
just
this
a badge.
is,
Yeah.
right? And there's somebody to held accountable for that.
Yeah.
Now you have committed a felony somehow.
Right.
Not only can you maybe now see how he came into being, how he judged that you committed that felony, but what rule in the law is that felony based on? Who made the decision to make that a law? Where is this coming from? How was that decided? And now the dynamic changes from one person has somehow decided that became law and then made a fine about that, to no, actually, it's everybody here agrees that this is a law that should be enforced, and you're the only one that's going against it, and the police officer is just doing its job, right? So it's both a shield and a sword almost, to protect not just the individual but also the police officer for doing the right thing here. And now suddenly right things are very incentivized, because if I find you, but it's wrong, right? Later on, you fight it in law, and it's wrong. Now it has entered on my record that I did follow the procedure as a police officer. You also did follow the procedure as a citizen, and okay, it was determined that you were not guilty, but it's not inputted into your record as you've done a bad thing and you didn't get a strafblad because of this. And also, it's the police officer starts to get a record that he does the things according to the procedure, and he's not doing anything wrong. Maybe the law is wrong. That's different, right? So the police officer itself is also encapsulated. But if there is a police officer friend of him that does things repeatedly wrong, for example,
right,
now he has something to go
now
against.
there's accountability.
Now there's accountability, and we can incentivize good cops to be the best cops there are, instead of letting good cops be the bearer of guilt of bad cops. And this is very, visible, for example, in the United States, where there are a couple of police officers that are really ruining the show for all of the really hard-working good people that are just doing their job.
Would there in this case, in this scenario, then also be like a reward system? Like, for example, what would incentivize me to be the best cop out there possible? Like, obviously,
you
I'm
get
being
a really good record that you do the right thing, that you're very integer, that you are on the whole a good police officer. That goes to your record for maybe a promotion, but it also shows, for example, if you would go to a court system, right? You have to testify. Now you have this whole record behind you that all of these people think that you're an amazing cop and you're all doing the right
because
thing.
One of the biggest problems in the US with the policing system is that if there finally is some accountability, they can just push them and move them over to another department, and none of that record follows them, if there even is a record to begin with, right? So I guess in this system that you're advocating for, instead of just representing a badge and an institution and an idea of power, you're representing an individual that's traceable, right? So I think that's a great idea.
But in order to accomplish that, it's not just necessary to build an administration system that makes these systems and stuff like that, because we could have done that already. Why haven't we done so, right? The difference here is that the police officer itself is encapsulated and can leave when it wants to, right? So he can, he is first a person, right? And also a police officer. And within that police officer function, he has executed the law several times. but one day he decides to leave the force, or and there's a bad experience, or whatever. He takes a new job. Now, the record of what he's done stays with the police, but he is, of course, first an individual. Should the next job judge him on the fact that he was a police officer? Or is it more like, no, he was a police officer in the past and now he's something different? He is no longer able to act with also the authority of a police officer because he's no longer a police officer. Now he's back to being citizen first. So the police officer itself becomes independent first, and then the system around him. And otherwise, you'll get the situation where you're a bad cop, you're a good cop, and I'm your police officer manager. Now, I've seen you get into trouble a couple of times, and you also get into trouble a couple of times, but now you start to do the annoying behavior. You start calling him out on his bad behavior.
Yeah.
And now what happens is I put all his mistakes and I put them with you, and I then say, look at this bad cop, look at all the bad stuff he's doing.
And then you kick me out to kind of get rid of the trouble, right?
Yes.
To make your working day a little less hard.
Yes, or I say things like to you, either you don't do anything with this, or I'm starting to make it a problem for you. You don't have a case in this sense because I, as a manager, have control over you.
Right.
That's the difference. Participation versus autonomy. Control breeds obedience and standardization. Autonomy breeds participation and accountability. There's always a measure between the two systems. But what I have seen specifically, and this is why I started this now, I've dropped everything else I was doing and I said it has to happen now or it doesn't happen at all, is that I see a very big shift from a little bit of control systems to extreme control systems.
Right.
Especially in digital systems.
Right.
I think what is really important to mention that autonomy, because we're talking about very big
things
here, right? Society, like political topics,
Yes.
financial systems,
Yes.
very big things. And of course, we want to change that, but we are also practical.
Yes.
We know we cannot, like, Tonomy actually tried to go to governments, and of course they were like, what the fuck are you guys? Like, and so, what's important to mention is that now the vision is more a bottom-up approach. So all of these mechanisms and systems that Chris just talked about, we're not gonna go at the Netherlands now is this new system where everyone has autonomy and control the entire internet. No, it's like we are trying to apply it within small communities, within companies. That's also how I got involved, for example, because my company wants to partly implement this in the future, right? And so this is maybe to understand a bit more the approach here and what the mission is. We are also practical, right? And so we have a very big vision, I think, but also you have to start somewhere.
Yes.
That's why now the first invention kind of was this identification, because for every software that you're building, of course, at first you need a way to log in. So it made sense to start with that, right? And that can now also be applied to other systems, other companies, with certain limitations. Of course, with autonomy comes also a loss sometimes, you know, or like compromises is a better word.
Yep,
of course.
But that's maybe to make this a bit more like.
Thank you for bringing us down to earth.
No, I think it's very nice to talk about these big things.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Very interesting. But just to stir the conversation a bit, what's the roadmap and what we are trying to do here?
Yes, for sure. And yeah, go on.
No, I was gonna say, like, on that roadmap, like, where are you guys with the company right now? Where do you guys stand?
Foundation.
How foundation stuff? Okay, foundation. Sorry, no problem.
Yeah, I know. Okay, so this is one of the biggest issues. Is people can't get their head around this. This is really difficult for people to get.
It's because we're so conditioned to just follow the current system, right?
Yes, and to that I say, old world thinking won't solve new world problems, right? So this needs to be also on its fundamental level needs to be more independent. But on that, your question, so autonomy identification is now ready for integration. We have our first MVP already. We are recognized by the W3C Foundation, which is an international standard foundation. that this technology is really cool and working. We're very much involved with or talking to Telos that are reviewing our software, and I think at least so far I've been told that they think it's very cool. So thank you for that. Yes, we are now, instead of looking very big picture, which is what I like to do, and somebody caught me on that, so thank you for that. So we're now thinking, okay, it needs to work on its smallest level first inside of a company first, right? It has to make sense on a small scale to be able to make sense on a big scale, just with ants, right?
Yeah.
Sure, I can have an ant colony of 5 ants. It doesn't make that much sense, but if it works on 5, it can probably work on 100. And so that's what we're doing now. So we're looking at, for example, warehouses and supply chains, just getting the approval processes of documentation through an organization. It sounds very simple and easy, and that's the whole point. And what this gives corporations or organizations that use this technology, every piece of software that interfaces with our technology becomes GDPR compliant by default, and starts to have one of the highest forms of encryption that are currently available to the market. And it can do that and this is the real unique part, it doesn't require the user to go through very technical aspects of it.
Amazing.
So what we see usually in very big security systems is that I have to trade this. I have to trade with the security of the system versus the usability of the system.
Yeah.
And the reason that this dynamic changed is because we draw it back to the users first, instead of I have to do it with your consent.
Yeah.
And that's different. Or with your, I have to store all my information at you instead of just keeping it for myself first.
Right.
The
Amazing.
advantage that also comes with it, like for the user, for the end user itself, obviously privacy and that you own really your data is the biggest advantage. But for systems that use this, a big advantage is also that it's very hard to hack. So because the data is stored on individual devices and not within one big network, like on Facebook, for example, it is really hard. I think, Chris, you said 79%?
No. 67% of known successful attacks. So this is not of all possible attacks, but attacks that were carried out in 2020 that were successful are nullified by the system. This means that they're not just, I have a resistance against it or something. They're just not possible. It's like fishing in an empty pond. Yeah, you can totally do it.
But you won't get a fish.
You will never get a fish.
Right.
So that's one of the unique ways. And we do this again because we kind of reverse the dynamic a little bit. And it sounds, when we discovered it, it was like, just like staring us in the face or something like that. It is like, why did nobody come up to this? But that's actually because of us talking to a lot of people in hacker spaces and stuff like that, especially skeptics of these new technologies. If you're an innovator, please go listen to the skeptics, especially if they're smart and logical, and just hear them out, right? And then try to see if you can make the systems work.
Yeah, absolutely. Do we have any closing topics or
That was
already?
I would like to...
Yeah, an hour already went by. It's been really interesting.
no.
Yeah, time flies. But yeah.
Yeah, maybe it's interesting. What's the vision for Autonomy, for the foundation?
Yeah, for sure.
After this first now smaller steps, what we try to do.
Yeah, like what would be your, let's say, you have 20 or let's maybe say the next 10 years. What would you like to achieve in these 10 years that you think, wow, that would be really nice, and I think I would go to bed smiling thinking I did what I wanted to do today,
10 years.
We can also do
Lord.
5 if that's too
No,
nice.
no. It's too easy. Yeah. Let's do 5.
Okay.
By 5, I want to have succeeded in bringing some of the autonomous networks already on an integrated level, so that these autonomous networks are actually using each other in order to create these proofs. And well, of course, to be a really big foundation and have a lot of resources to work with it, but to make it a little bit more practical, to have systems in place that actually help, for example, the European Union complete its visions. Right, so there are a lot of very good initiatives going around. And I think by using these tools, we can actually create the sustainability and the participation that we want to create good governance. So in the next 5 years, I want to be able to trust my government again. In the next 5 years, I want to be able to trust the food that I eat again. In the next 5 years, I want to be sure that if I buy something and I'm not explicitly cooperated or being co-opted into a system that I really disagree with, which is one of the most evil things that you can do to somebody, right? Which, congratulations, this is also being done to you. I want to move away from that. I want to have made a dent in that. And if I have not succeeded within this 5 years, actually, I don't think we will be able to, because there will be systems in place that will prevent this too much. Right, the struggle is already very hard.
Yeah,
but,
and
it's getting harder.
Yeah, I think I kind of agree with your assessment there, and so I wish you the best of luck, and I will definitely be keeping tabs on your progress.
Well, I'm very happy that I've got the chance to meet you both.
Yeah, it's been.
Where can we listen to more of these beautiful podcasts? Actually,
do you want to plug?
Well, on YouTube mostly is where we post all of our podcasts for now. But where can we find you, Chris, is my question.
I use only one commercial social media, that's LinkedIn. So you're free to reach out on there.
Perfect.
Of course, I'm on all kinds of other channels, but I won't mention those here. We have, of course, a website, the Tonomy.foundation. You're welcome to check it out. We're on Discord. Oh, we use Discord. Hey.
Perfect. And for us, it's the Midnight Kebab, by the way, on YouTube.
The Midnight Kebab.
I don't know what you feel about that name, but we love it.
Midnight Kebab.
Yeah. It started as sort of when you're with your friends and you're having that midnight kebab, sometimes you have some pretty good conversations around then. And it's a whole feeling, right? Having that kebab at midnight.
I know this feeling, but it's not. I didn't consume kebab at that time.
It could be your own.
It could be any other time, but mostly usually
I'm not sure you could
around midnight.
It as food.
But there was also another name that I really wanted to push for. It was like two people's names.
We if you want, there's a lost episode that I guess you can still find. I don't know if it's online.
But we'll tell you.
It was our first episode. Was actually deciding what we're gonna call this podcast. Yeah. We didn't have the camera. We didn't have the mics. Anything.
We both came in with like 10 names each. I came in with 10. You came in with 10,
and then we voted on them. And
look at you now.
Yeah.
Professional.
Yeah.
Wow.
Absolutely.
Hopefully
and
more by
having more and more more and more like interesting guests and people like you. So yeah, I'm really happy with all
If
of
you'd
this.
like to see me again on this podcast, make sure that you scream and shout to make sure that I get on it. Right?
Yeah, for sure.
These guys are lazy. So.
More him, but all right.
Right.
Well, thank you so much, Chris, for your time, and we'll speak to you soon. All right. New episode every Monday.
Midnight Kebab! Midnight Kebab! Shout out! Hey! Let's go!
Nice. That was perfect.